Hi, I'm going to talk to you about a feature a week. A feature a week is an exercise that I'm conducting right now, and is basically I'm going to write a feature-length screenplay or full-length play every week this year. So I am on the third week, third script. I have 2 completed screenplays, and now I'm working on my third. Today is Wednesday, so I'm 60 pages in to this script, and I'm a part of a lot of forums for writers and a lot of writers groups, and a lot of questions always pop up about how do you start, or how do you deal with writer's block, and all of these interesting things that tend to fascinate me because I never get writer's block. I just don't. I never have. I thought I did. I was like, well, I couldn't write 10 pages an hour, so I must have writer's block. And a lot of the reason why is because maybe it's my amazing ADHD powers, which allow me to just continually come up with things that are going on. And sometimes I'll write multiple projects at the same time. That way, if I find myself petering out on one, I will pick up the other and start running with it. But when it came down to what I'm doing right now, it is very concentrated. I have to plow through a single plot line, a single story that I'm trying to tell. I am not doing beat sheets. I'm not doing a lot of research. I'm not doing anything that slows down that process. So it is kind of stream of consciousness writing, but what I liken it to is playing with action figures when I was a child. If you gave me characters, I could look at this action figure, and in my mind I would create a story behind the way he looks, or the way I feel like he moves and acts. And from there I would just extrapolate all this crazy dialogue. And of course, when you're a kid and you've got these 2 characters and you're going through it all, you don't really think about how creative that is and what you're really doing, because what you're really doing is your world building. And even if you're drawing upon the stories that are given to you, if you have Star Wars figures and you're using the Star Wars backdrop, you're not reenacting the scenes exactly. Oftentimes you will take those divergent roads and you'd want to tell a different story. One that always comes up to my mind as far as like the action figure dialogue was, I got Star Wars action figures before my my understanding what the Star Wars universe was. I didn't get to watch the Star Wars movies for a good long time because we were living overseas. And my grandmother would buy all of the toys for us and send them to me, and I would look at them and I would just try to figure out what was going on, because I didn't have any access to the storyline, at least, not reliable access. So I remember distinctly that Han Solo and Chewbacca were taped together to associate them, to tell me these 2 are together. And it was my grandmother who did it. My grandmother taped the 2 of them together because they were partners, and I needed to know that. So in my mind, trying to come up with it, what I thought was Han Solo was a man who, when the moon came out, would turn into Chewbacca. Chewbacca was basically the werewolf version of Han Solo, and for a good year and a half, that was the storyline. Was he would be walking along, and then he would turn into a giant furry monster. And I told countless stories of that. And then, I come to find out that Chewbacca's his buddy. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay. The same thing with Darth Vader. I thought that Darth Vader was just one of the other characters in a suit of armor. So, because Obi-Wan had the same kind of weird lightsaber-y thing. It was like a flashlight that they put a plastic thing in. These were the old school action figures. Because they looked to be holding the same kind of thing, I thought that Obi-Wan dressed like Darth Vader when it was time to do serious battle. The rest of the time he was in a bathrobe. He's just relaxing, hanging out, having a good time. And Luke Skywalker I thought was just a karate guy, because it looked like he was wearing a karate uniform with a black belt, and he too had the flashlighty thing. So getting back to writing, it's all play. It's all creativity. You're following the stories and you're telling yourself a story as you're writing. And I find that to be a great help. To think of it as a story that you're being told. And even if it's being told by you, you still can make room for surprises. You can still set characters in motion and then find interesting and fascinating things. The way I'm writing now, because it is 20 pages a day to get to that 100-page mark, 90 to 100-page mark, I am finding it amazing that around this point, the 60 point, I find myself really invested in characters that I didn't know very well, and now I'm learning. I've learned as I've gone along. It's like watching a very slow movie, and I'm loving it. I think that it is a good exercise. I'm not saying that these scripts are going to be brilliant. I'm not saying that they need to be produced by any stretch of the imagination, but what they are doing for me is they are opening up the idea that you can surprise yourself, that you can tell a story that you weren't aware of at the beginning. Because I usually start and know kind of where the end is. I have a map in my mind of the stories when I start, but a lot of these stories are just log lines. They're just slivers of ideas, and I'm chasing the idea, and it's very rewarding. I find that writing in this fashion is helping me nurture an imagination, because I've written where copious amounts of research and copious amounts of back notes and copious amounts of prep, and in all of that prep I find myself so focused that I'm missing options. I don't give characters options. If I do too much research, I know where they're going to go. I know what they're going to do. I can honestly say the script that I'm writing right now has surprised me. I've had several surprises, and I don't feel that they are out of the blue surprises. They are the logical, aesthetic motion of the story has led me to a place where I was not prepared to go. Emotional places, which was really weird because it is a cheesy action flick. Basically, I'm working on a script called 10 to 1, in which 10 assassins are basically hired to kill one another. So they're all trying to kill one another. And as I move along, I'm looking at these assassins that are from all different varieties of government organizations from all around the world, and mapping out how they might have crossed paths and how they might have known each other and what kind of resources they have. And the narrative that came out of it has surprised me quite a few times, actually. In the middle of it, I'm trying to avoid tropey things. Impossible. Don't actively try to avoid tropes, because then you're really straining. Just recognize the trope and make sure that it is, because tropes become tropes because they work. Just don't rely on them, and don't be offended if someone says, "Oh, that's a trope," or that's cliche. Cliches only become cliche because they make sense, because they've been used so often. So if you come up with something cliche, look for the thing that identifies it as your work. Look for the thing that makes it make sense. Don't shy away from the logical step simply because it's like, well, everybody's seen that. That is tired. I've worked with many producers who are quick to use that's a bit on the nose remark, only because they're fearful of comparison. But the truth of the matter is, we're inspired by the things around us and the things that go on. And yes, you should avoid blatantly easy things, but you also should accept that some truths are universal and acceptable and should be used. You do not have to reinvent storytelling every time you set out to tell a story. There is this ongoing argument about originality and what's original. Well, give up on being original. That is absurd. It's not the story that's original, it's the teller. It's the person telling the story who's original. So mix it up with yourself, tell the story that you want, and I'll check in probably before the end of this script just to touch base and tell you how it's going. But as of for right now, I'm at the 60-page mark. I'm writing basically 10 pages an hour, 2 hours a day. And that guarantees that it's not great, but a not great finished script beats a fantastic unfinished script any day.